Well, hi everybody. We are now entering the third and final week of our winter pledge drive. So I want to remind you again, if you haven't heard it already, this will be the first time hearing it. But we need to recover $1,000 a month in monthly pledges, monthly donations, and we still really, really need your help. So I'm going to ask you to give it some more thought this week. I know some of you want to, and so my number will be below this video on the YouTube page, down where it says show more. Click show more. It will give you my telephone number, the email address, and a link to the donations page on our website. But for now, it's time to do the weekend video. Get ready. Well, this weekend, Mike and Barris were both in Calgary, and they probably finished up their last session about 45 minutes ago and are getting ready to get back on their planes back to the States. So uh, I was inspired to do today's video on a comment that somebody put on Facebook about what Barris spoke about last night. Um, Sounds like the meetings were very interesting. Mike has a terrible case of laryngitis, worse than my own, and so I'm really curious to see how it all went. But apparently, Barris really turned on some light bulbs last night. He made a statement that the reason that Jesus even had to call Paul was because Peter, in essence, was denying grace and wouldn't accept it. So I like that topic, and so I want to give you my take on it as well. And I'm really curious to see what Bears had to say about it. It will be in a download available shortly after they get back and we get all the recordings together. Um, and stay tuned for the next Powercast coming up this Thursday because I'm sure the guys have a lot to say. But just for a teaser, I'll give you my take on it. Um, so why did Jesus call Paul? He had all these other guys that were with him before he died, and they were with him after he rose from the dead, and then and they were all uh, preaching in Jerusalem after he rose from the dead, and yet so a short time goes by, and Jesus decides he's got to call Saul of Tarsus to be an apostle, and I am convinced it's because you got to look at what was going on at the time. And Paul says something very interesting in Romans chapter 1, so I want to read that to you real quick. He says, Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God, which he had promised afore by his prophets in the Holy Scriptures. Now, I think there's a lot in that. It's based on my take on it, because when you start reading the bigger picture, which you can find in some of Paul's letters and Peter's letters and James' letters, and in the book of Acts itself, um, there was a lot of arguing going on between Paul and the other guys who came before him. And according to Acts, it was no small dispute. And according to Paul, it was no small dispute. So you need a little background on this. Obviously, Jesus tried correcting Peter himself directly when it came to grace, and when it came to the gospel of peace, where when it concerned Jews and Gentiles, and Peter was not getting it; he was misinterpreting it, and so you can see why. Obviously, the message Jesus of his gospel, of God's gospel, of Christ's gospel, was obviously not getting out. So Paul was called to be an apostle, and he was set apart for the gospel of God. I think he's making this rather clear, and he even says, because as the scriptures foretold, meaning the gospel was foretold in the scriptures, and that is the gospel of grace and peace. And but Paul and the other guys he was definitely apart from the other guys. He argued with them. He went his own way. He did not stay with them and work with them in Jerusalem. He went on his own. He was apart from them, and completely so. And these guys, obviously, they did not they did not preach or teach the same gospel. Paul taught the gospel of God that he understood, and they taught what they thought they understood. And they truly did deny grace. They didn't get it. They instructed people to obey the commandments of the law, and Paul taught a completely different gospel. And they were even sneaky and went behind Paul's back. Paul got very angry about this. Paul had gone to teach the Galatians the gospel, and after he left, James sent his men there to teach them that they had to obey the law, which was not the gospel of grace. And Paul found out about it, and in his letter to the Galatians, he was very upset, and he let them know full well that he did not agree with James and Peter, and he confronted them to their faces even, and that they had bewitched them to fall back under the law, or fall under the law, and obey the law. And these guys basically made an effort to undermine Paul's gospel, especially when it came to the gospel of grace. Um, and so these guys were a band of grace robbers, even in their writings. They were writing to people that Paul had taught anything, and they were trying to undermine what Paul had taught, calling the people that Paul taught foolish and simple-minded. And so I if anybody thinks that the writings of Peter, James, John, and Jude agree with Paul, they do not. And these guys truly are grace robbers, and they even rob people in modern times of grace when it comes to, if anybody gives them the same equality as Paul as far as their message goes, considers that they have this equal and same gospel. They didn't. And Paul was preaching the gospel of grace, and they were coming along behind him to rob anybody of that knowledge that they could, because they didn't understand it themselves. So I know it's revolutionary, but have a revolutionary week.